You're listening to the Downeast Mike podcast, the quirky little podcast from Maine. And now, your host, Downeast Mike.
Dee-dee-dle-dee-dle-dee-dee. Good morning, everybody. This is Downeast Mike of the world-famous Downeast Mike podcast, coming to you live, somewhat alive, from way down east, Maine. This is Downeast Mike podcast, episode number 138, news and commentary for Sunday, July 26, 2026. And our motto here on the Downeast Mike podcast is that some of this is whimsy, some of this is true, and the interpretation of it all is entirely up to you. Did you know that the Downeast Mike podcast contains absolutely no mean words, just wholesome goodness from down east Maine? In today's episode, it's Test Tube Baby, repeating that story from 1978. Downeast Mike's Cars of Curiosity from 1978. A real estate roundup from 1978. And a story about a 100-foot tapeworm from 1886. Everybody loves tapeworm stories. Today, our word of the day is defalcation, D-E-F-A-L-C-A-T-I-O-N, defalcation, and that it means an intentional or reckless misuse of funds, as in a trust, in a violation of fiduciary duty. The court, as an example, the court held that defalcation, unlike fraud, may refer to a non-fraudulent breach of fiduciary duty. That was from Scott Riddle. Wow, a failure to meet a promise or expectation. We don't hear defalcation too much. Another story, a sentence using that is, the tea table shall be set forth every morning with its customary bill of fare and without any manner of defalcation. No reference to embezzlement there. That line was from a 1712 issue of Spectator magazine, one of the examples of the earliest and now archaic sense of defalcation, which is simply defined as curtailment. Defalcation, maybe you'll have a place to use that word as you go about your day. Well, we had a little fun here on the, I don't know if it was fun, but on the Downeast Mike podcast, we had a call from one of the local newspapers, and they wanted us to comment on some story that's in the news, a big political thing going on. And, you know, what they don't realize is the last thing that this podcast needs is attention drawn to it. We are very perfectly happy to be talking to the same 20 or 22 people who actively listen every week, and the 340,000 people on 351,000, but who's counting on YouTube, who've subscribed to the channel and never listened to the podcast. We love them too, because they went to that effort of clicking the button, but to leave me a long-winded message on my personal number, because I'm not out on any of the dating apps, and I just can't figure out where that reporter got my number. My mother used to write for that paper, and she didn't do such mean things. All right, the world's first test tube baby, and this is from 1978. It was the undisputed lead headline across major newspapers worldwide, including the New York Times, the Old Gray Lady, the Daily Mail, and the Guardian. And it was about, her name was Louise Joy Brown, the world's first baby conceived through in vitro fertilization in a test tube. What if you would pound on the wall and say, "Let me out," if you had any kind of consciousness at all? She was born via planned C-section late on July 25th at Oldham General Hospital in Lancashire, England, to parents Leslie and John Brown. The medical feat was spearheaded by physiologist Robert Edwards and gynecologist Patrick Steptoe. Don't step on his toe, after a decade of research. I don't remember when that happened, that day, but no, I guess it was all over the news. Also on this day in 1978, Middle East peace negotiations and Cold War tension high-level diplomatic meetings between Egyptian and Israeli foreign ministers at Leeds Castle in England, and then U.S. Secretary of State Cyrus Vance was there, and all preparing for follow-up diplomacy going on in 1978. Also, Cold War diplomacy remained tense following the recent trial and conviction of Soviet dissidents Natan Serensky and Alexander Ginsburg earlier that month, which drew fierce international condemnation. And then one other story from 1978, there were concerns over U.S. inflation and the declining value of the U.S. dollar against the Japanese yen. Inflation, imagine that. All right, here's a story. This is a longish story. Well, a longish story, but I felt that the author needed it to be repeated because he wrote it with so much enthusiasm. It was actually 1973. And it was an editorial in the Lincoln County News from the Happy Hollow Hearsay. Hand tools are band tools today. And here's the story. I made an outstanding purchase last summer, and believe me, it wasn't an easy thing to do for reasons outlined below. I had occasion to purchase a hand lawnmower, the very last of the Mohicans left in the hardware store, and that one I ween had been standing there waiting for me to come along and claim it for some long time. I was amazed, astounded, yea, verily, even flabbergasted. Several hardware stores told me they just don't carry hand lawnmowers anymore. No demand for them. The trend today is all toward power lawnmowers, they said. Sheesh! Americans get lazier and flabbier in direct proportion to the number of square feet of lawn to be mowed. Naturally, I was deluged with wise counsel from my friends. Oh, for Pete's sake, don't buy a hand mower, get a power mower. What for? Just so I'll have more idle time to sit around doing nothing and let my arteries harden and let the old pipes clog up with cholesterol from want of exercise? Nah, laddie, just as long as this old carcass can stagger out and swish doon a few swaths of grass with a hand mower, he's gonna do it. A pox on your power tools. A murrain sees them. Did Adam have a power mower? Did Adam ever mow the lawn? Don't answer that. Nonetheless, the American trend to own a riding this and a riding that is causing everybody to sit around and let his heart get flabby, so that when the demand does come for extra exertion, plupo, they fall on their face, blotto, extinct, kaput. And remember the old saying, after you're dead, life ain't worth living. Me, I like to feel the old muckies bulging after a race around the Happy Hollow herbage with my hand mower. I intend to use a hand mower for the first 100 years, and then I shall fall back to a hand scythe for the second 100 years in order to keep in condition for my next 300 years coming up. I don't know how long this guy wrote for the paper. But anyway, he goes on and on. I actually counted 59 exclamation marks, and the point of the story being that he liked his hand rotary mower. Remember, you push them and they make that fluttering sound, and then you have to back up and push it forward again. They didn't cut all that well, but I guess they used them on greens at the golf course. Let's move on to real estate from 1973. 9-room farmhouse on about 3 acres will be surveyed with nice distant country view, vinyl clapboards, combination windows, forced hot water heat, small barn, good garden land, freshwater pond just a short walk in the woods, and a boat ramp to salt water only 2.5 miles away, $30,000. 1973. Privacy, is the end of a half-mile dirt road good enough? Old center chimney cape with the chimney missing, waiting for the purists to start restoration. 5 miles from town. It includes 50 acres with stream, stone walls, woods, and wildlife, and that's $22,000. Here's another one, a year-round home on Pemaquid Lake in the process of completion. Sturdy northern products, 2-bedroom home with custom kitchen, huge fireplace, full cellar, and a nice view down the lake for $40,000. On the River Road in Newcastle, you could buy an 8-room home on about 3/4 of an acre, town water. I know they had town water there. 4 bedrooms, family room, 2 fireplaces, shed and barn for $47,000. Also continuing in our real estate roundup here, early 19th century brick house with attached 2-story brick barn, 10 rooms and 3 baths. Excellent condition, lovely grounds on about 3 acres in Newcastle and within walking distance of schools and shops. That was 90s. That was pretty high price. 90s. Wow. They usually wanted to sell that one. $5,700 by a fair-sized camp furnished on Long Pond. And you could buy a furnished cottage with 100 feet of deep saltwater frontage, drilled well and septic, access to the launching ramp, and that was $17,000. And for $40,000, you could buy a new log cabin for a year-round home with a concrete basement, equipped kitchen, large dining room, cathedral ceiling and brick fireplace, 2 bedrooms, full bath with molded tub, baseboard oil heat, wall-to-wall carpets, and 170 feet frontage on Pembroke Lake, and that was $40,000, 1973. There's more of those there listed too. It's just crazy what the prices were. Village home in Damariscotta, 4 bedrooms, walking distance from Damariscotta shops, desirable location, large living room, fireplace, kitchen, dining room, etc. $43,000. And then if you really wanted to go, saltwater estate, 350 feet shore frontage, about 4 acres, with a beach, deep anchorage, runway and float, lovely 4-bedroom home, fireplace, 1.5 baths, sun porch, electric heat, etc. $130,000. We'll roll it back a little further here to 1886. And this is a story about a picnic riot out of Chicago. An immense crowd gathered at the Bohemian Picnic at Jefferson Sunday afternoon. A detail of Chicago police was present. Towards evening, a party of roughs appeared in the grounds and made an attack on the Chicago police. They first assailed officers Casey and Miller. A fight ensued in which many joined the city and town police, used their clubs vigorously against the chairs, stones, knives, and other weapons of the assailants. And in the fight that followed, revolvers were drawn, several shots were fired. Mr. Murphy, a bricklayer, was slightly wounded. Several arrests were made. It is supposed that some of those foremost in the onslaught on the police were anarchists. Wow. Here's a happier story. The work of quarrying granite for the Market Street Bridge in Philadelphia, and this is 1886, it's been awarded to James Andrews of Biddeford. It's begun at Andrews Quarry on the Pool Road in Biddeford. Between 40 and 50 vessel loads of granite will be quarried out of Maine and delivered at Philadelphia between now and the middle of next December, a time of great industriousness. We have a story here. In riding about the country on my vacation, some things that I hear and see may be of interest. At East Dixfield, this is a guy on his horse. At East Dixfield, I found that Mr. Butterfield and Son were doing quite an extensive business in the manufacture of staves for apple barrels. They have an invention of their own whereby the staves are chamfered at the ends and grooved at the same time. The hail shower of Monday afternoon was very destructive in this section. The apple crop is estimated as almost valueless in consequence. Noting that Mr. White has an acre of corn which has no equal in this section. Here's another story. A drive accidentally brought me past the farm in New Gloucester owned by J.H. Day of Lewiston. It's very pleasantly situated on an elevation overlooking the Shaker Village at Gloucester, Maine. It is about 8 miles from Lewiston. Mr. Day has been making marked improvements of late. He is about completing a barn 150 feet long, in which will be a silo, conveniences for 65 head of cattle, and a very convenient cellar and entrance from the tie-up for the cattle in winter. His farm contains 300 acres, 5 acres of sweet corn, 18 Jersey cows, makes 100 pounds of butter a week, and he proposes to make this a dairy farm. It sounds like it already is. He talks about, in the future, erecting a windmill, which will force water from a spring nearby for the house and the barn supply. Here's some other little news blurbs out of Harpswell. A large schooner has been chartered to load ice at the houses of Jordan and Haggett, Great Island, Harpswell. One cargo has been shipped this season, and 6,000 tons have been sold. There were 12,000 tons of ice in the house. Out of Washington, Maine, H. Brown was crushed under a large rock that he was trying to remove from his farm and severely injured internally. That was last Tuesday. Jonathan Billings, who brought to market a 200-pound halibut a few weeks ago, brought in another weighing 103 pounds. Out of Sanford, the Springvale Advocate reports that Dr. Lorenzo Dow was thrown from his carriage just above Emery's Mills last Sunday afternoon. The doctor landed on a pile of rocks and was unconscious for some time. Postmaster Lowe is reported as having improved slightly in health while at Wells Beach. That's a separate story. Out of Shapley, Maine, Allie Ham, son of Stephen Ham, was seriously injured Wednesday by being thrown from a horse rake. In a story out of Sanford, Horatio Downs, a farmhand at work for Honorable I.S. Kimball, fell from a load of hay in a hayfield at South Sanford on Saturday night and was fatally injured. He died in about 3 hours. He leaves a widow and 9 children. Very dangerous manual labor. Let's get to our tapeworm story. Dr. True of Auburn, the tapeworm expert, has performed another notable achievement. I didn't know he had more than one. Joseph Donovan of 212 Neeland Street in Boston came down to see Dr. True in Auburn a few days ago, and in 2 hours and 20 minutes had removed from Mr. Donovan a tapeworm 100 feet long. 5 other doctors had in vain endeavored to get the reptile. That's probably in a jar somewhere, too. The steamer Percy V out of Bath and Fort Popham line lost her propeller by the breaking of her shaft while on her down trip Friday afternoon. The disaster occurred when the steamer was off Phippsburg Center. The steamer will be towed to Bath and placed on the Marine Railway, where she will be supplied with a new wheel and shaft. It will take about a week to make the necessary repairs. Other marine notes: the schooner Nellie Payne of Boston is at the Delaware breakwater. The captain's throat has been cut by the cook. No further detail available. The bark William Bessie of Wareham, 1,027 tons, is reported lost at the mouth of the Columbia River on Friday night. The crew was saved. That's good. She was built at Bath in 1873 and was owned in the Wareham, New Bedford, in Oregon. There's a boat that gets around. Okay, we're going to roll it back up to 1973, actually, and this will lead into our car story. On Wednesday afternoon, July 25th, Arthur House Jr., age 20, of Damariscotta, stalled his 1969 Ford pickup while in the McFarland parking lot in South Bristol. He started to move again when he rolled into the side door of a vehicle owned by Ralph C. Norwood, which was parked. The Norwood 1970 American Gremlin received $150 in damages, according to Trooper Sanborn. Now, last time I was in that car, I think we were going, I want to say to Ellsworth, but I don't remember because I was quite young. and we were going to go hear Reverend Carl Stevens speak. And you can look up Carl Stevens, The Bible Speaks, at church. He ended up in quite interesting circumstances in Massachusetts, but that's a story for another day. But I do remember the strange juxtaposition of Aunt Kathy. There was a cat, first there was like a cat across the road, and maybe it was Uncle Ralph said, "Oh, kitty, kitty," because they were worried about hitting the cat. And then Aunt Kathy was looking off to the right a little bit later, and there were some deer there, and she was like, "Well, boys, wouldn't that look some good in the pan?" So they loved animals, but they also were willing to eat them if necessary, I guess. All right, Downeast Mike's Cars of Curiosity. Born on an air sickness bag, how the 1970 AMC Gremlin saved an independent auto giant. This is a story out of the late 1960s. The American automotive industry was facing an unprecedented threat. There were efficient, reliable foreign imports led by Volkswagen Beetle, and they were flooding the domestic shores. And Detroit's big three auto giants, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, were spending hundreds of millions of dollars to engineer new subcompact answers from the ground up. Well, AMC, which was an independent automaker headquartered in Wisconsin, they lacked the vast financial reserves of its rivals. They needed a subcompact car fast, but they only had a budget of $12 million. What would that get you today for a car? And the solution came not from a high-tech engineering lab, but from 30,000 feet in the air. And the story behind it is, in late 1966, AMC's visionary design chief, Richard Tague, I think it is, was aboard a commercial airliner alongside company executive vice president Gerald Myers. Lacking drafting paper, Teague, he reached into the seat back pocket, pulled out a paper air sickness bag, and he sketched out a radical idea. His concept was deceptively simple. Take AMC's existing compact sedan, the Hornet, and shorten it by chopping off the rear end immediately behind the back wheels. The resulting design featured a long, muscle car front hood terminating in a sharp, truncated camback tail. By utilizing the front half of an existing production vehicle, AMC eliminated the massive cost of developing an entirely new chassis and assembly process. So AMC beat both Ford and General Motors to the punch on April 1st, in 1970, April Fool's Day. The company officially introduced the AMC Gremlin to the public 6 months ahead of the Chevy Vega and the Ford Pinto. Initial reactions were a mixture of amusement and curiosity. The car offered an unusual profile, but its entry-level price tag of $1,879 made it one of the most affordable American vehicles on the market. To keep costs down, the standard base model lacked a rear seat entirely and featured a fixed rear window, catering to buyers who wanted an economical two-seater cargo runner. For an extra $80, the buyers could step up to a four-passenger model, which featured a flip-up rear glass window and a fold-down rear seat. It had a big engine, a small footprint. The competing imports relied on small, underpowered four-cylinder engines. AMC took a different approach with the Gremlin's long hood. The standard 1970 Gremlin came equipped with a heavy-duty 3.3-liter inline six-cylinder engine, producing 128 horsepower, more than double the output of a standard Volkswagen Beetle. An optional 3.8-liter six-cylinder raised performance even further to 145 horsepower. This still seems so underpowered. Because the car retained the heavy front end of a full-size compact sedan, drivers noted a nose-heavy weight distribution and a choppy ride over bumps due to its shortened 96-inch wheelbase. However, on open highways, the Gremlin offered passing power and a highway stability that small, four-cylinder imports could not match. Equipped with an oversized 21-gallon fuel tank, the Gremlin could achieve up to 500 miles of driving range between fill-ups. It's a long, long road, without stopping. Rather than downplaying the vehicle's unusual aesthetic, AMC embraced it. Marketing campaigns labeled the car cute and different, featuring a cartoon Gremlin mascot painted on the side fenders. The strategy paid off handsomely. Over 60% of Gremlin buyers were under the age of 35. Over its 8-year production run from 1970 to 1978, AMC sold more than 670,000 Gremlins, turning a shoestring design exercise into one of the most profitable vehicles in the company's history. While modern retrospective lists often criticize its polarizing styling, automotive historians view the 1970 Gremlin as a masterclass in corporate resourcefulness, a bold gamble sketched on an airplane sickness bag that kept an independent American automaker thriving against all odds. Our final story of the day is about I think we may have covered this before, but it's so remarkable. The Greenland shark. The Greenland shark, they can live almost 500 years. Think about that. Imagine walking along a cloudy, storm-battered shoreline in County Sligo, Ireland, in April of 2026. The tide rolls out. It reveals a 10-foot-long, gray-beige, deep-sea creature resting on the tidal flats. And what researchers and volunteers found that morning was unprecedented, the first ever documented stranding of a Greenland shark on Irish soil. Judging by its length and weight, tipping the scales at over 440 pounds, this animal was roughly 150 to 200 years old. It was born during the reign of Queen Victoria and the presidency of Abraham Lincoln, back when three-masted sailing ships crossed the oceans and the automobile had not yet been invented. Yet by Greenland shark standards, this giant was just a teenager, barely reaching reproductive maturity. Greenland sharks are the longest living vertebrates on Earth, capable of reaching lifespans between 300 and 500 years. Some swimming in the ocean today were alive during the time of Shakespeare. And because a 200-year-old deep-sea shark rarely washes ashore, the researchers jumped at the rare opportunity to perform a necropsy to better understand this elusive species. And moving that 440-pound shark was not an easy task. They covered it with seaweed to protect it from seagulls and other things, probably crabs would come up there. And the next day, a crane hoisted the animal onto a lorry, or truck as we say in America, to transport it to a regional veterinary lab. When they were working on a specimen this old, this is very interesting, safety protocols are strict. The researchers donned protective overalls, masks, and gloves because an animal living for centuries could potentially harbor ancient, dormant viruses or unknown pathogens, so careful routines were vital. What they found inside was extraordinary. It had a 110-pound liver, a 75-pound heart that was healthy, an empty stomach but a full lower intestine, indicating it had recently digested a meal despite its slow metabolism. Its teeth are built like a saw. They have straight, sharp top teeth and angled bottom teeth, perfectly evolved for ripping chunks off cold water carcasses. The researchers carefully preserved its skin, which is covered in little hooks called denticles, for future display at the National Museum of Ireland. And what we still don't know about Greenland sharks is, despite their distribution across Arctic and North Atlantic, scientists do know very little about exactly how they survive. They're slow swimmers. They're thought of as pure scavengers. However, evidence has shown that they are opportunistically will hunt fast, live prey like seals, but they think that they ambush them while they sleep in the dim, freezing waters. To survive the near freezing temperatures, their bodies contain high concentrations of natural antifreeze, and the side effect of this evolutionary trick is that their raw meat is highly toxic. We don't know where their mating or pupping grounds are located, and only one pregnant female has ever been scientifically observed. We don't know how many pups they carry or how frequently they reproduce. Because we cannot accurately measure their population size, it's nearly impossible to track how severely threats like commercial fishing bycatch are impacting them. Losing a 150-year-old shark before it even gets a chance to reproduce is a major blow to population recovery. The most thrilling discoveries from this stranding and recent companion studies lay in how these animals completely defy age-related decline. For decades, scientists have assumed that the Greenland sharks were nearly blind, partly due to a common parasite that attached themselves to the front of the shark's eyes. It's amazing to see this bug sticking off the front of their eye. But a 2026 study revealed something remarkable. Their retinas remain fully intact and specialized for low-light vision. Even in sharks over a century old, the visual cells look young and healthy. Unlike human eyes, which degrade with age, the Greenland shark's vision system is built to last for centuries. Scientists believe this incredible tissue resilience comes down to genetics. The Greenland sharks show extraordinarily high activity in genes responsible for repairing damaged DNA. We can learn a lot from these sharks. And then the heart alone, researchers examined that 75-pound heart. They found scarring, which is a normal sign of aging that would typically lead to heart failure in humans, yet in the Greenland shark, the heart continues to beat flawlessly for hundreds of years. They have evolved a natural resilience to the structural damage associated with getting old. This tragic stranding of a young ocean wanderer in Ireland gives us a rare glimpse into a creature that moves at a completely different pace of life. That is it for the podcast for today. Until next time, this is Downeast Mike, wishing you and your loved ones a day that is full of grace, love, and kindness. We'll see you.
Taking my board, headed for the beach, where all my troubles will soon be out of reach. It wasn't too long you had me down, 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 reminding me that I'm a cowboy on the wrong side of town. Oh, I'm a blue water cowboy, salt waters are running in my veins. Yes, I'm a blue water cowboy, on that wide blue ocean I ride. Kicking back, watching the waves roll in. Another tide, another day goes by, and later on we'll go for a ride, ride, ride. That open highway never lies. Oh, I'm a blue water cowboy, salt waters running in my veins. Yes, I'm a blue water cowboy, on that wide blue ocean I ride. Oh, I'm a blue water cowboy, salt water